Okay, today I'm going to talk about version 4 and what has happened since it came out. It was a very controversial version. The other versions were pretty seamless. Everybody's excited about version 2. Well, I mean, I started with version 2, and then when version 3 came out, people were really excited. It came in pretty seamlessly. Everybody enjoyed it, and it just continued. But version 4 was a radical change of how the game operated. And I'm just going to try to explain for people that are new or people that saw this, where a lot of people left the hobby because of version 4. And right now, of course, my opinion has always been that was a mistake and that they should have stuck with version 4. And it really is, in my opinion, better than version 2 and 3. And I'm going to go through this in this series of videos. First, I just want to say the one area that I agree with the people that quit, that left, was because of the army books. Now, I really like the army books. I like how they set them up. But there is a huge, first of all, they only came out Desert Rats and Africa Corps. So when people saw these two things, they thought that they were going to get something like this. This was, I believe, the first Army book that I got in version 2. And it was the complete North Africa. It took all these little books that they had before in version 1, consolidated into one tome. And it is huge. You can see the thickness of the book. The German section alone starts on page 20, I believe, and goes to page 85. So it's 65 pages just for the Germans. Unfortunately, what we got in Africa Corps was nothing like that. It was a nice solid book. It was much cheaper, of course, but it only ran total, even with all these extra fluff and pictures and models and so forth, about 40 pages. So less than half of what you got in the Africa Corps or in the North Africa book for the Germans alone was in this book. So people were very disappointed. Not to mention the same kind of treatment was given to the Desert Rats. And so people were very disappointed. First of all, you have only 2 of the armies that are in North Africa. We understand North Africa, but it's just 2 armies, and they were very incomplete. So people got very upset about this and thought, well, this is not a good way to do it, where you restrict people to very few models. I mean, people had Shermans instead of Grants, and that's all you could get here in the British book. Basically, the Grants, Crusaders, and Stuarts, and people had Shermans and Churchills, and so you can only get these units in the game, and that was it. It was very few units. Now, I understand where they were going. They were trying to set it up so that new people could get into the hobby. And to be perfectly honest, it got me into North Africa a lot. Even though I'd started out with North Africa, it wasn't a book that I really glommed onto. I play Americans, and the American section is very small. So for me, you know, it was exciting. I was collecting Germans, I was collecting British. It was easy to collect the models, to have armies, you know, all the armies. You know, it's the only time in Flames of War history I had all the armies that were out. And so they tried to transition by converting the books from version 3 to version 4 so that you can get along, but it didn't quite jive well with the new rules. And you know, as I say, I'll go into that later. But this was not a good start for Battlefront, and a lot of people got very upset with them and left before Battlefront could improve on the product. Now, the first thing that they did to make things easier was to provide these unit cards. Now, they were already included in the boxes, and people got upset at Battlefront for just putting these cards with the models. Like, you had to rebuy the models again. What if you already had all these models? It wasn't fair. So they put out a pack that you can buy, and you can get all these cards for that army. And it was a very small price. You know, the books were $20, which was a little high in my opinion because they were so small. But they were hardback, And then you can buy the unit cards. They gave a pack for like $5, and then you could buy the command cards for $5. And the command cards were in response to, let's say, in the North Africa book, in the beginning of the book, they would always have these warriors. Okay, so you could add warriors to your forces to make them better. And there were other options because everything in these books were so plain Jane that you didn't have the warriors, you didn't have special moves that you can do. And here you can add by spending points to get these cards into your force to make them a different kind of force that was already in the other books. I know I'm not explaining that real well, but it tried to, when they brought in the command cards, it tried to make it more like the older books, that you can upgrade your units, you can make them faster, more experienced, they can get a re-roll, or a warrior that would give your units special abilities, like being able to remount easier, or rally faster, or assault better. So that's what these command cards, and I'll quickly just take them out. So for instance, you pay 1 point and you can get a reroll on anything. 6 points, you can get Erwin Rommel. 4 points, you can get Riedmer, which would be in the other books, except now you have them on cards. So people were upset. You had to get the book, you had to get these cards, you had to get these cards. It added up real quick as far as money is concerned, and that's true. That's true that it is now more expensive, even with the cheaper prices of the cards, because at first they these command cards were not worth $5. They were definitely worth more, and now they charge them about what they really should, around $10 or so for these deck of cards. But the great thing is that if I got a Panzer II and I want to put a card, and upgrade it, I've got all those rules right here. I don't need to go flipping through this book to say, okay, Riedmer does this, and and just getting all the rules out of the book. I can just reference right here on the card. Okay, what is a spearhead? Here's the spearhead. Here's the stormtrooper rule. How many points were they? Here's all the stats. Everything's right there on the table for you. So I thought personally this was a great move by Battlefront. Made gaming a lot easier, and it went a lot faster because you're always looking for these stats. You can't possibly remember unless you play it over and over and over again. But if you just play once a month or so, it's hard to remember all these stats. So I really appreciated what they did with the cards, both for the command cards and for these. A lot of people didn't like that. They thought they just should have it in the book. They should print it out. But you know what? That's really for people that are experienced, that play it a lot. This is not a game that you can play, for most people, you can play on a regular basis. And it's unfortunate because it's a great hobby, but you want to build up your force, play a couple games every now and then, and that's basically what you can expect out of a hobby like this. You're modeling, it's half modeling, half playing, and sometimes you don't get to play as much as you would like. So that's how it started out. People were comparing it to 8th edition of 40K, and they decided to put out an entire booklet of all the forces so that you can play them until the army books came out for those forces. Whereas Battlefront just started out with these books and came out the models for these books, and that was it. And a lot of people did not like the method that they used. Well, then they came out with Fighting First, and as an American player, I was super excited. And but this was the first book that really had a complete army in it. Everything that was in here, first of all, it bumped up to almost 50 page, or about over 50 pages. It had everything, for the most part, in this book that it had in North Africa. So it would have all the tanks, like the Shermans, which the Shermans did not make an appearance in Desert Rats. So it was a complete section. So not only did you have all the pages, pretty much everything that was here in North Africa is going to be here in Fighting First, but it also launched with its command cards and its unit cards. so you didn't have to wait. So instead of just getting the book and then that was it, and then you had to work with that, Fighting First came out with its cards right away. So it was a complete book. It had its complete deck of cards. The American Army was ready to go, and you knew you had everything that you were going to have in mid-war as an American Army, and I loved it. You know, it was personally great for me. That's when I super got excited about the game, and Fighting First was its first good move that gave me confidence about the direction of going in 4th edition. Then they came out with Avante, which was the Italian. Again, just like the American book, it was a complete book. It came out with its, you know, from that point on, Battlefront learned its mistakes. You put your command cards, you have the unit cards launching with the book, and then you bring out the models, and everybody from that army starts building that army. So again, you know, the Avante book, even though it was a smaller section in the North Africa book, and it's just under 50 pages, but it had everything that it had in the North Africa book. So you were ready to go, full army, and everything was fine. Well, they knew they were going to go into the Germans and the Russians, and the Germans were going to get the full treatment when the new books came out. And I don't have the book here, I have it on my iPad, but basically they took Desert Rats, nuked it from orbit, and came out with Iron Fist. And that was another British book that was a complete book. It made everybody happy about the British in North Africa. It was now going to be complete, so you get that book and those cards, and that's when they start upping the price on the command cards and the unit cards, because it was much bigger now. And so it became you know, a little bit more pricey to get the cards and stuff, but you didn't have to. But if you wanted the complete army, you did have to. So then the Russian and the German books for Eastern Front started coming out, and these were very good books. Iron Cross had almost everything. It didn't have the armored personnel carriers, and it didn't have I don't believe it had Panthers. It did have Tigers, but it didn't have a Tiger Company. And that was something that was always in the North Africa book and the Eastern Front books. So they came out with these. This was mostly the infantry armies. They started giving you the buildings rules in them. So I'd highly recommend getting at least one of these books so that you have the building rules, unless they're already in the new rule booklet, which I don't know if they are. And then they came out with Ghost Panzers and Red Banner to be more of the tank armies. And that completed mid-war, okay? And that was supposed to be this book right here. You can see how thick the Eastern Front book, and these 4 books did a pretty good job of covering everything that was in the Eastern Front book, along with their cards. So mid-war was then complete. They had a rough start, but as you could see, when you get all these books, then you have all of mid-war, and mid-war is a great more, you know, everybody calls it a very balanced. Well, then we get into late war, and late war was started out with Fortress Europe. Now they had a version of this to start out in the beginning of version 4, just to get you started with the old points, but this was the first one that had the new points, the new point system, and had basically, it was a transition. It was all the models that were in the mid-war book, excuse me. It had all the models that were in here, but then they just converted it to late war units and points. And so you could, you know, if you were waiting for your book, like right now, the Russians have not come out yet. It's just Americans, British, and Germans for D-Day. So if you're a Russian player, they knew you were going to wait a long time, so they gave you a lot of different units to choose from and play with until the Russian book comes out, so the big 4 can still play. But you could see here, look how thick this book is. This is what we really expected, was to get a book this thick. And sure enough, when America came out with its D-Day book, and the German book was a little bit smaller, but you could see now these books are over 100 pages, okay? That's with all the fluff and everything. They had new rules, new scenarios, just everything you would expect now and moving forward. And the crazy thing about that is that this book is still $20. So, you know, when you're looking at these older books, Desert Rats wasn't, you know, $20. I suppose it was much better than before because these books here were $50. But I mean, if you add up all the books, it's going to be a lot more than $50 for like the Eastern Front book. Of course, they reduced it to $30 before they went to a different version. But $20 wasn't really worth it for these books because they're so thin and so flimsy, and I think that really rubbed people the wrong way. But this book, wow, this is a lot for $20. I think it's a bargain. Now, the problem is that they upped the unit cards and the command cards. I think the command cards now are $10 and the unit cards are $15. You know what? If you're just going to play that army, totally worth it. I mean, think about it. You get this whole tome of a book. You get all these command cards, the unit cards. So $20, $35, $45, so almost $50. But you get a magnificent book with rules and all the special characters and different variations of it in a very organized way, and makes playing the game a lot easier. So version 4 has really come in its own as far as the army books. It had a rough start, but it is doing much better today.